You clicked because you saw it. A handful of walnuts, somebody over 75, and the claim that it costs nothing. I didn't believe it either. I thought a handful of walnuts was just a snack. Then I found the numbers, and the numbers stopped me cold. Because what I uncovered is this: a small handful of walnuts a day, eaten a certain way, does more for a body past 75 than most of the pills sitting in the medicine cabinet, and it costs pennies. Our grandparents knew this. They kept a bowl of them by the window. We forgot why. The trail I followed runs back to a study that began in 1958, a Swiss laboratory in 2016, and a detail buried in an old kitchen habit almost nobody uses anymore. Stay with me, because the last piece is the one that changes everything, and you already have everything you need to do it in your own home tonight. Let me tell you where this started for me. I was clearing out my late aunt's house last winter. She lived to 94, sharp to the end, and on her kitchen windowsill was a chipped bowl, half full of walnuts still in the shell, with a little nutcracker resting on top. I almost threw it out. Then I remembered she ate from that bowl every single evening for as long as I knew her. And I thought, wait, what did she know that I don't? So I started digging. And I want to walk you through exactly what I found, one step at a time, because each thing I turned up was stranger than the last. Let me start with the part everyone jokes about. A walnut looks like a brain. Two halves, all those folds and ridges. For centuries, people said that was a sign, an old idea called the doctrine of signatures, the notion that a food shaped like an organ was meant to heal that organ. I always thought that was superstition. Pure nonsense. But here is what made me sit up. The joke turned out to be closer to the truth than the science that mocked it. A walnut is the single richest common nut in something called alpha-linolenic acid. That is a plant form of omega-3, the same family of fats your brain is quite literally built from. 1 ounce of walnuts, which is your handful, right around 7 whole nuts, carries about 2.5 grams of it. No other nut on the shelf comes close. Not almonds, not cashews, not pecans. Walnuts stand alone. Now, why does that matter after 75? Because the aging brain shrinks. That is just biology. The tissue loses volume, the connections thin out, and memory gets slower to answer when you call it. Your brain is nearly 60% fat by dry weight, and it needs the right fats to hold its structure together and keep the wiring insulated. Researchers at the University of California ran a study on older adults and found that those with higher walnut intake scored measurably better on memory and cognitive tests than those who ate none. And a long project out of Harvard, tracking women for years, found that eating just a couple of servings of walnuts a week was linked to sharper memory scores later in life. Not a miracle, but a clear, measurable difference from a food that costs less than a cup of coffee. So the old wives were right about the brain-shaped nut. That satisfied me for about a day. But it also opened a bigger question that I couldn't shake. Because if something this simple was this good for the brain, why had I never once heard a doctor mention it? Why was the bowl on the windowsill and not on a prescription pad? Hold that question. Because the next thing I found was about the heart, and it is where the numbers got serious. Here is the clue that pulled me down the next tunnel. In 2013, a massive study out of Spain quietly proved something that should have been front-page news everywhere, and most people I know have never heard of it. It was called Predimed. Thousands of older adults, many of them in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, all at high risk for heart trouble. The researchers split them into groups. One group ate a Mediterranean diet with a daily handful of mixed nuts, walnuts prominent among them, and they followed these people for years, watching what actually happened to their bodies. The group eating the nuts had roughly 30% fewer major cardiovascular events, fewer heart attacks, fewer strokes, fewer deaths from heart trouble, 30%, from adding a handful of nuts to what they already ate, Let me put that in plain terms. If you lined up a room full of people your age and told them a simple daily habit could cut nearly a third of the strokes and heart attacks headed their way, they would fight you for it. They would pay anything. And it was walnuts and their cousins the whole time. Why does it work? Those same omega-3 fats calm the inflammation that stiffens and clogs arteries. Walnuts also carry a specific amino acid called L-arginine, which the body turns into a compound that helps blood vessels relax and stay flexible. And they help pull down LDL cholesterol, the kind that builds up on artery walls. Study after study from institutions like Loma Linda University in California confirmed it. A handful of walnuts a day can drop bad cholesterol by a meaningful margin without a single side effect. Now, here is where I stopped taking notes and started getting angry. Loma Linda has been studying this for a very long time through something called the Adventist Health Studies. These began back in 1958, tracking tens of thousands of people and what they ate over their whole lives. And the finding that came out of it was extraordinary. People who ate nuts several times a week lived, on average, about 2 to 3 years longer than those who didn't. 2 to 3 years. From a bowl of nuts. So this knowledge is not new. It is not fringe. It has been sitting in the published record since before many of us finished school, and yet somehow it never made it to the front of the room. It never made it onto the little paper bag from the pharmacy. That is the part that started to bother me deeply. Because think about who does not profit when an old man's answer to high cholesterol is a 50-cent handful of nuts instead of a monthly prescription. Think about who loses when the fix has no refill, no copay, no brand name. I am not saying anyone hid it in a vault. I am saying that nobody with a marketing budget had any reason to remind you. And so it slipped out of common knowledge quietly the way a path grows over when no one walks it. The bowl on my aunt's windowsill was that path, still worn smooth after 94 years, and I was starting to understand why she never let it go empty. But the heart and the brain were only the first 2 rooms in this maze. The next thing I found is the one almost nobody talks about, and for someone past 75, it might matter more than either. Here is the question that led me there. Why do so many people, once they pass a certain age, start to shrink? Not just in height, in strength. The grip goes. The legs get unsteady. Rising from a chair becomes a project. We call it getting old, and we shrug. But I wanted to know what was actually happening in the muscle, and whether a walnut had anything to say about it. What I found took me to a laboratory in Switzerland. There is a substance your body can make called urolithin A. You do not eat it directly. Instead, you eat certain compounds, and the good bacteria in your gut transform them into it. And walnuts happen to be one of the richest sources of the raw material, a family of polyphenols called L-argitannins. In 2016, researchers connected to the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, one of the most respected science institutions in Europe, published work in the journal Nature Medicine showing what urolithin A does inside aging muscle. And it is remarkable. It triggers a kind of cellular house cleaning. Your muscle cells are full of tiny power plants called mitochondria, and as you age, the worn-out ones pile up like broken machinery on a factory floor, dragging everything down. Urolithin A helps the cell clear out the broken ones and build fresh, working power plants in their place. The result, in study after study since, has been improved muscle strength and endurance in older adults. Real, measured improvement in the very thing that decides whether you can carry your own groceries, climb your own stairs, and stay in your own home instead of somewhere else. That is not vanity. That is independence itself, sitting inside a nut. And here is the detail that made me put the whole thing together. Those precious elagitannins are concentrated in the part of the walnut most people scrape off and throw away. The thin, papery, slightly bitter skin wrapped around the nut meat. Nearly 90% of a walnut's antioxidants live in that bitter skin, the part we pick off because it's fussy. We have been throwing away the most powerful part. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking this is fine for people with money, or a garden, or somebody to shop and cook for them. You're thinking, I'm on my own, on a fixed income, and I'm not about to start hunting down Swiss laboratory supplements. I want you to hear me clearly, because this next part is built for you, the person sitting alone who thinks the good stuff is always for somebody else. And that is exactly the problem I kept running into, dear. One bowl on one windowsill answered one question, but a body past 75 is asking a dozen of them at once, and a video like this one only has room for the walnut. So I sat down and wrote it all out properly. The whole collection of books I made for people just like you, more than 550 pages of it, the part that never fits in 20 minutes. In there, I show you how to read the quiet warnings your own body has been sending you for years, how to spot the silent shortages that make a person feel old before their time, what really happens to a senior heart when you eat eggs every single day, which forgotten fruits keep blood sugar steady after 70, and the questions to ask before you ever agree to a procedure someone is rushing you toward. Your doctor gets 12 minutes with you. This is written for the other 23 hours and 48. If you want it, scan the QR code right there on your screen, or use the link in the description or the pinned comment. Now let me get back to that maze, because there is one more room in it. You do not need a supplement. You do not need a specialist. You do not need to spend $1 extra beyond a bag of walnuts, which at most grocery stores runs a few dollars for enough to last a couple of weeks. Here is exactly what to do, and you can start tonight. Buy walnuts with the skin on. That's the ordinary brown walnut halves you already know, the ones with the papery covering. Not the blanched, not the candied, not the ones roasted in oil and salt. Plain, keep the skin. That bitter little wrapper is your medicine, so stop peeling it off. Measure a handful. That is about 1 ounce. Roughly 7 whole walnuts or 14 halves. You do not need a scale. Cup your palm. What fits is close enough. More than that is not better, because walnuts are rich, and a small daily amount beaten consistently over months is what moved every needle in every study I found. Chew them well. This matters more than it sounds. Those elagitannins have to reach your gut bacteria to become urolithin A, and breaking the nut down properly is how you hand your gut the raw material it needs, and eat them every day, not once in a while. The Adventist people who gained those extra years did it as a habit, not a treatment. Consistency is the whole secret of the thing. That's it. No purchase beyond the nuts. No help required. No special skill. A person living alone in a small apartment can do every bit of this with a paper bag and their own 2 hands. This is the great equalizer, and that is exactly why I love it. But there was still one more room in this maze, and it turned out to be the one my aunt understood best of all, because I kept asking myself, why the evening? Why did she always eat from that bowl at night, never in the morning? I assumed it was just her routine. It wasn't. It was the secret. And it's the piece almost every modern article leaves out. Here is what I finally dug out, and once you know it, you will never eat a walnut the same way again. Walnuts are one of the very few foods on earth that naturally contain melatonin, not a trace. A meaningful amount. Melatonin is the hormone your body uses to fall asleep and stay asleep, the one that regulates your entire day and night rhythm. And here is the cruel part of aging that nobody warned you about early enough. As you get older, your body produces dramatically less of its own melatonin. By the time many people reach 75, they make a small fraction of what they made at 25. That is why so many older folks lie awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. It isn't a personal failing, it's a shortage. Researchers in Texas measured the melatonin in walnuts and then did something clever. They fed walnuts to their subjects and drew blood afterward, and the level of melatonin circulating in the blood actually rose. The walnut melatonin was getting absorbed and put to work. A food, not a pill, not a prescription with a warning label. A handful of nuts, raising the very hormone that older bodies stop making. And it goes deeper. Those same omega-3 fats and antioxidants in the walnut have been linked in research to better sleep quality, not just falling asleep, but the deep, restoring kind of sleep your brain uses to clear out waste and cement your memories. So the evening walnut isn't just food. It's the brain repair, the heart protection, the muscle building raw material, and the sleep signal, all arriving together at the exact hour your body does its overnight maintenance. That is why the bowl was on the windowsill by her chair and not on the breakfast table. My aunt didn't read the Texas study. She didn't need to. She inherited the habit from her own mother, who inherited it from hers, back through a chain of women who simply knew that a few nuts at night meant a better night's sleep and a sharper morning. That is the knowledge that got buried, not the science. The plain habit passed hand to hand until a generation raised on sleeping pills and cereal boxes let it fall out of the family. But I promised you the finale, the single thing that ties it all together and multiplies everything else. And this is the piece that truly stopped me, because it comes from the oldest corner of this whole trail. Remember those elagitannins, the raw material your gut turns into urolithin A for your muscles? And remember that bitter skin? Here is the problem modern science quietly admits. Walnuts also contain natural compounds called phytates and tannins that can lock up some of the minerals inside the nut and make the whole thing harder for an older, slower digestive system to fully break down. Your gut past 75 is not the furnace it was at 30. So you can eat the nut and still leave much of its treasure on the table, undigested, unused, and the old kitchens had already solved this. Long before any laboratory existed. The method is soaking. You take your daily handful of walnuts, put them in a bowl, cover them with water, add a small pinch of salt, and leave them on the counter overnight, 4 to 8 hours. In the morning, you drain them and rinse them. That's all. This simple soak begins to neutralize the phytates and softens those tannins, unlocking the minerals and making everything inside that nut far easier for an aging body to actually absorb. It even mellows the bitterness, so the skin goes down easily, which means you finally get all 90% of those antioxidants instead of picking them off. I trace this practice back through old household manuals and traditional kitchens across the world, from the mountains of Persia to the farmhouses of Europe, where soaking nuts and grains before eating them was simply what a careful cook did. It was in the rhythm of the home. Soak at night, eat in the morning, or soak in the morning, eat at night. Nobody wrote it on a prescription because nobody needed to. It was as ordinary as letting bread rise. Then the modern grocery store arrived with its sealed bags and its promise of convenience and told us food needed no preparation, no patience, no thought. And in gaining that convenience, we lost the small ancient step that made the food truly work. We traded the knowledge for the packaging. So here is your complete method, the whole thing I dug out of studies and archives and a dead woman's windowsill, assembled into one habit you can start tonight. Take a handful of plain walnuts with the skin still on. Put them in a bowl of water with a pinch of salt before you go to bed. In the morning, drain and rinse them and eat them slowly, chewing well. Or flip it, soak in the morning and eat your handful in the evening to ride that melatonin straight into a deeper sleep. Either way, every single day, without fail. For that, you get the brain fats that hold memory together. The heart protection that cut major events by nearly a third in the Spanish study, the muscle-saving raw material the Swiss laboratory proved rebuilds aging cells, the melatonin that refills what your body stopped making. And now, with the soak, An old body that can finally absorb all of it instead of half. Pennies a day. No prescription, no refill, no side effects, but better sleep and a steadier grip. This is what a bowl of walnuts by the window really was, not a snack. A quiet inheritance handed down for generations and nearly lost in ours. Let me tell you what this whole investigation really gave back to me. Because it wasn't just a health tip, it was proof that the people who came before us weren't simple. They were wise in ways we've been talked out of respecting. They kept a bowl by the window because it worked, and they didn't need a laboratory to tell them so. I think you're the kind of person who already suspected that, the kind who trusts what's proven over what's advertised, who gets a little suspicious when the only answer offered comes with a price tag and a refill. If that's you, then you and I are looking for the same thing, and we're going to keep finding it. So let me ask you something specific, and I really do want your answer. Did someone in your family keep a bowl of nuts out like my aunt did? Or do you remember an older relative soaking nuts or grains overnight the way the old kitchens used to? Tell me in the comments, because every time one of you shares a habit like that, we recover another piece of what got buried. And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this reaches. If you want to keep pulling these forgotten things back into the light with me, this is the place for it. We're a growing group of people digging up the practical knowledge earlier generations relied on before it got paved over with products and fees. Next, I'm chasing down something about a common kitchen spice that our grandmothers stirred into warm milk every night, and what I found about what it does to blood sugar while you sleep genuinely surprised me. You won't want to miss where that trail leads. Keep that bowl full, and keep asking why the simple answers went missing, because they're still out there, waiting for someone stubborn enough to go looking. Before you go, one more thing. This video showed you what I found, but the exact daily walnut method, step by step, the way my aunt did it, is waiting inside the Wise Living Circle. In there, you can ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. And you won't be alone. You'll belong. Just point your phone at the code. Cancel anytime with one click. I'd love to see you inside. Now, walnuts are only part of the story. There's a simple magnesium mistake that could be quietly harming you, and the $1 fix that helps you sleep better and protects your heart. It's starting right here.